So, welcome to the Lochaber Supports Palestine event with John Finney and Salim GHAYYADAH. We are looking to we're going to let both John and Salim lead the discussion for the first portion, and then we're going to take questions. So if you'd like to either raise your hand or use the virtual hand, presumably, or put your questions in the chat. And Marie is going to facilitate all of those. I think it might be best if we could leave our mics off while John and Salim are talking, and then we will just take contributions as they come. So John Finney is a former MSP from 2011 until 2021 and has spoken to Lochaber Support Palestine at the very first event, I believe, in the, is it the West Church Hall? I forget which. Duncan's Bay?
It was in Duncansborough.
Duncansborough, was it?
Right.
Which was, I think, very well received and set the group off in a really positive footing, actually. I thought that was a really nice, and that was the screening of the John Pilger film as well. Salim GHAYYADAH is a paediatrician consultant who has been working in the NHS for over 20 years and is a British Palestinian doctor of vast experience, and has been in the news for a number of fundraising events for money going back to Palestine and picking up people there, and of course spoke at the Inverness Vigil just this afternoon, so he's clearly a very busy man, and so we're very, very grateful that both John and Salim come and speak to us today. John, I think it sounds like you've got a sort of structured thing you like start us with, so I think if we let you kick off and then we can hand over to Salim.
Okie dokie. As I said before, we're joined by everyone. Peter, just please feel free to tell me to shut up at any given point, because what I was going to do, I thought Salim would very admirably cover the humanitarian and medical aspects. I was going to focus on the broader political situation and how that impacts on the genocide, because as we know, it's going to be politics rather than military might that's going to bring a long-term solution and indeed provide our Palestinian sisters and brothers with the rightful, secure homeland that they deserve. So I want to talk about that in relation to the much referred breakdown, so-called breakdown of the so-called world order, the destruction and distribution of power among states and with actors. So I think there is an ongoing decay. And whilst obviously I'm not a fan of the present anarchy, I wouldn't want to infer I was a fan of that so-called world order either, because after all, it's that world order that's, and these very structures that have allowed 3/4 of a century of abuse of and disregard for the Palestinian people. And it's a structure that's benefited elites and corporations, a structure that's shown little regard for the poor and the weak, a structure that displays downright exploitative contempt for the developing world. And as one example, I stumbled across this the other day, and I know there's been a development regarding babies, but it was a staggering fact, I thought, and that was Africa is home to 94% of malaria cases, that's 246 million, and 95%, just under 600,000 malaria deaths. Do you think for 1 second that would be the case if that was an issue in the so-called developed world? I certainly don't. So I want to consider the other more pernicious actors, perhaps the so-called military-industrial complex. We've seen shameful moves, not only from the US and the UK, to seriously ramp up military spending, often proudly accompanied by a boast that this is at the expense of support for the developing world. We've seen unelected NATO is going to get its disgusting 5% of GDP from member states to be spent on instruments of death. Not a mention of engaging one more diplomat, not a mention of deploying one more diplomat to try and resolve issues. Now, I'm not a pacifist, but the resolve issues, we'd resolve conflict by speaking in the first instance. And the military-industrial complex is that's the obscene relationship between a country's military, the defence industry that supplies it, and pivotably, the policymakers who fund it. Now, in reality, of course, that's you and me. And we know there is no profit in peace, no shared dividend. from enhanced international relations. Many corporations and indeed many individuals now have greater wealth than some sovereign states, many sovereign states. They seek, and I suggest succeed in influencing policy, not just military, but trade, energy, environmental, all of which will come to play with and come into play with Gaza. And if you look at some of these institutions that I want to consider, some of the institutions you might have thought would play a role in aligning with you and I and others of our movement, supporting international law and humanitarian norms. And I'm not going to rant about NATO forever. It's a memoir of my mind, but I do want to say that, for instance, if you look at that, it's had a provocative spread east. They lied to President Gorbachev about the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's not only east, but it's south. President Bush boasts that he had included 5 more countries, 3 Baltic, 2 Balkan, since then. And they seem to have shelved as far as can work out, but as recently as 2023, we're talking about a liaison office in Japan. So I mention them also because I read that on the 23rd of September 2023, just 10 days before the Al-Aqsa storm operation, Robert Bauer, the head of NATO's military committee, made a 2-day trip to Israel. And of course, more recently, we've seen Secretary General Mark Rutte praising Trump for attacking Iran. Trump posted that on his social media channel. I'll read you what Mr. Rutte said, and I'm quoting here. Mr. President, dear Donald, congratulations, thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary and something no one else dared to do. It makes us all safer. Well, I find that gratuitous and nauseating, and the one thing most certainly it doesn't do is make anyone any more safe. The attack in Iran was another illegal act of aggression, and once again the US's wee brother, the UK, participated in a breach of international law, and as has been the pattern of late, there was no parliamentary debate and no vote. And sadly, little outcry about that. And we've seen, to my mind, a really disappointing trend of hostility towards non-alignment. This is the philosophy of George Bush. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. Well, I was with neither of them, and I think it can be an honourable thing to stand as a principled state on your own, doing your own thing. I want to talk about the EU. That arose from the most laudable of intentions to post-Second World War with the oil, and there I go, I'm showing age, coal and steel, and for a never again situation, the very finest of principles. Since 2019, the President's Ursula von der Leyen, a right-wing German politician. Now, among my many insults today, I have to tell you, I think Germany is a faux democracy. It's very hostile to any suggestion of criticism of Israel. I have a German friend, and I've asked him about that, and he says, they can't go over the Second World War. Well, they have to go over their guilt. And the one thing I would have thought would have been prominent in Germany would have been a wish not to see that repeated. Sadly, that's not the case. And it was Ursula von der Leyen who was slammed for her, and I quote here, anti-Palestine, far-right Israel remarks in a speech celebrating the 75th anniversary of the apartheid state. And I'm going to quote her here again. You have literally made the desert bloom. Now, you'll all know that these are deeply offensive, racist, ahistorical claims that Palestine was barren and empty until the salvation of the arrival of European Jewish settlers. I'm a keen internationalist, and I'm dismayed to see the EU go that way. Likewise, the UN, I want to touch on the UN. It's a laudable ideal that's simply not working. The Security Council veto makes a mockery of debate, and non-adherence to resolutions that have arisen from debate also make a mockery. And I needn't remind participants here who the major offender against ignoring UN resolutions is. That said, international cooperation is an intrinsic part of any worthwhile future for our small planet. We're needing major revision of that and of structure and process of the UN to ensure that it has the authority to resolve and indeed police international disputes. I believe as a species we function best when we're cooperating, working for common goals for the betterment of humanity and our planet. And we've repeatedly seen, excuse me, I beg your pardon, repeatedly seen Israel's hatred of any objective reporting of their conduct. The UN are liars, Amnesty International are liars, Médecins Sans Frontières are liars, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, they're liars and they're terrorists. Now, a lot of people didn't quite appreciate that their remit extends beyond Gaza and includes Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, the West Bank and East Jerusalem. But pandering to Zionist lies, we saw countries, shamefully including the UK, freeze funding. I checked the other day there, and that funding all seems to be restated, according to the website, perhaps not by New Zealand or the US. But the West's increasingly in the grip of rich, arrogant, aggressive, misogynist, bullying males. These are individuals who are disregarding their own judicial system so they can have utter contempt for other people's systems. We know Trump's disregard for the Israeli judicial system, and similarly his ongoing interference in the Brazilian system there, is claiming that both Netanyahu and Bolsonaro are the subject of vicious witch hunts. He continues to interfere in Brazil in a quite unacceptable way, I think, no doubt due to the election of President Lula, a voice for sanity and peace, hopefully. And of course, bullying with the tariffs. And he has a mechanism for resolving disputes, that's to shout louder. I'm actually going to be quite positive today, but quite annoyingly positive for some folk. I think BRICS, the organisation that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, it could be a counterbalance. I'm not saying any of these countries are perfect. There's none of us are perfect. But I'm hoping for a more progressive approach and a progressive approach to international relationships, because it is all about dialogue. It's not whose side are you on always. It's something as simple as what is right and what is wrong. And most of us know that instinctively, and countries know that instinctively. And we've consistently seen double standards applied to the so-called Middle East. And a list of them here: Iraq, the Marsh Arabs encouraged to revolt and then abandoned. The Kurds, our Kurdish brothers and sisters, continually abused by the West. And of course, because of access to air bases in Turkey. Egypt, the Arab Spring, oh, that was great for a while, and then, oh, we don't like the Muslim Brotherhood. Free elections in Gaza, oh, we don't like Hamas. Syria, guy was on the terror list, he's okay now. That can switch very, very quickly. It's a great thing, oil and gas, for changing attitudes to individuals and their conduct. And of course, key to everything is control of information. Israel has no foreign press in Gaza. They've done their very best to annihilate the courageous, wonderful folk who are trying to bring us information in a balanced way. I remember a long time ago, you remember in the early days of this horror, there was a lot of drone footage. And I remember one, and forgive me, I forget the name, a young man in his 20s saying, they killed the last drone boy today. These are no coincidences. The statistics and the relative number compared to other world conflicts, they're utterly shocking, and it's quite intentional. But of course, and Israel introduced a law at the drop of a hat after these attacks in defence from Iran, and this was to make it an offence to talk about the extent of damage. Now, you always have to take with a pinch of salt, particularly X. I'm an X, lots of things, and your expertise does diminish. I accept that. There was one interview I saw with an ex-CIA man that said that the American intervention in attacking Iran was due to the extent of the damage Iran had inflicted on Israel, which was precisely why they might have brought in that law. And he cited the attacks on ports, the sites and the attack on the airport, on Mossad and some other security buildings. For the avoidance of a doubt, I don't want attacks on anyone. I think the level of destruction, the level of death is an obscenity, and we must move on from it. But we must be honest about things. We must be absolutely honest about things. In the UK, I have to say, and people will know my position on the Constitution, UK, once held up across the world as a beacon for many very positive things about rights. Even people whose own conduct was questionable supported rights. But we have a situation where the Home Secretary has long controlled the Metropolitan Police. Well, there's a very hands-on approach now, and anyone knows that any of the police structures, my understanding is the Gold Commander, never mind that the Met Commander was meeting with the Board of Deputies. There was daily meetings with the Gold Commander, the individual officer who would have been in charge of demonstrations. Now, I want engagement with everyone, but I think we know that the level of engagement there was with the Board of Deputies was entirely different to the level of engagement there was with peaceful demonstrators, and in particular the way that, for instance, the two politicians, it's bad when I forget Jeremy Corbyn's name, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell were clearly singled out for that. At the BBC, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, broadcast no evil. That's their. And as we've known in Scotland for a long time, the BBC, a once revered institution, is sadly just the UK state broadcaster. The UK state broadcaster, without doubt in my mind. The independent media, of course, is subject to a lot of shadow banning, and we've seen reprehensible attacks and misreputations just in the last week there of Owen Jones, for instance, his words taken entirely out of context, where he was using a counter-argument. These are dangerous times. I've got some notes here. There's lots of scribbles through the next bit of notes, because I actually had a read and I went, my word, I could find myself in bother for that. So I'm going to choose my words very carefully for the next couple of minutes. Hopefully choose them carefully all the time. I want to talk about the Prevention of Terrorism Act. That's a very, very important piece of public safety legislation. And I would be very, very concerned if any group of politicians, particularly who might be subject to foreign influence, and particularly if it related to profits and death, were to be swayed to cynically use that. And parliamentary procedures can be complex. They were very cynically used there. I am no supporter of Russian white supremacist groups or Moldovan neo-Nazi groups. I dare say they could have waited another day or another week. The fact that they were conjoined was quite intentional. And it did lead to situations, and I can argue both sides. I can see why people went, we are not going to be labelled as neo-Nazi sympathisers, but it is a cause of great shame to me that there wasn't one single Scottish MP felt that they could take a different view on that particular issue. I support the right for non-violent peaceful protest. I was a police dog handler for a decade and had an explosive search dog, so I had dealings with trying to avoid terrorist situations with my wee Labrador, Bracken. At no time in any of these briefings from people about the current threat level, and my word, that threat level's changed, were water-dissoluble paint or words, things that we had to be aware of and have concern for. So having a look around here, I think everyone's of an age bracket when they'll recall the absolutely cynical situation of politicians acting quickly to gag so-called terrorists without judge and jury determining that, and the ridiculous situation of news bulletins giving the words of a politician voiced by an actor, so as none of us could be corrupted by hearing his actual words, if you remember that. The words of Gerry Adams are voiced by an actor. Well, you know, let's not make an ass of things, but let's none of us get to jail for wearing a T-shirt or having a poster. I think that plays into it. We have to accept that there was a process that's gone about. I don't like the outcome, but you can't accept the process only if it brings decisions that you like. I don't think anyone's suggesting that there was anything untoward that. I thought it was a rather unusual procedure, and I don't know what made the Moldovan Nazis and white supremacists from Russia such a sudden issue, but these are bodies that I would obviously be concerned that they were posing a threat to our communities. I want to contrast the difference we've seen in the treatment of Palestinian protesters and indeed environmental protesters in the City of London. I saw the BBC positively salivating at the prospect of interviewing creative accountants, Mr. Clarkson and Andrew Lloyd Webber, beside a road jam blocked with tractors, and the difference between that and the approach and the narrative that's given, the editorial approach that's given to peaceful protesters. Israel, as we know, because this is a matter of public record, has invested £1 million in UK politicians. It's a drop in the ocean, absolute drop in the ocean compared to AIPAC and America. But I think they can safely say that they've got the UK Prime Minister and the UK Home Secretary, indeed the UK Foreign Secretary, on their payroll now, well and truly. But I don't know if any of you saw the US Foreign Affairs Committee and the chair turning up for his first day, the congressman or Senate. He turned up for his first day chairing the US House Foreign Affairs Committee wearing an IDF uniform. And that's beyond parody. It's absolutely beyond parody. And with my learning in Portakabins at Tullyallen 40 years ago, I can use terms like aid and abet, watch and consort during the commission of a crime, act as an accessory. And like Blair and Brown before, Stammer very clearly falls into these categories. Everyone has a right to a presumption of innocence, but should, in my mind, face judicial process. The other interesting thing, I think, is you have a difficult argument to make if you're purporting to support a two-state solution, but you're arming a state whose sole intention is to ensure that never comes about. That does seem to me to be counterintuitive. I think long-term, the education clearly is the solution to things. I saw an interview with an Israeli educational psychologist who mourned the fact that Israeli children are actually told that Palestinians are effectively not human and they're terrorists, and we need a change in that. Britain has a shameful historical past. You good folk are in Geriston, Fort William to keep us nasty Highlanders in place, and we know that the role education can play in suppression. You know, I was taught at Atticari Primary, it no longer exists, about the Battle of Hastings and the Tudor Kings. They didn't want us to know anything about the clearances or the negative impacts or the act of prescription. And of course, in those days, Gaelic was very much a poor relation, backward looking. And it's that approach to the whole culture that we're seeing. This is why these buildings are being attacked. This is why there's been a desecration. We saw it in Afghanistan with them blowing the statues. It is a tactic of the ignorant and the malicious. Just about 3/4 of the way through, Chair. I'll just, if you bear with me, please. I want to just labour a wee bit about the UK's role and colonial role, and that isn't just a historic thing. That's a fairly recent thing too. You'll recall Prime Minister David, or you may not recall Prime Minister David Cameron, in the face of overwhelming evidence, actually standing at the front of Number 10, apologising for the death of a human rights lawyer, Pat Finucane, in the north of Ireland, and he was a real human rights lawyer. And there's, unlike the pussycat human rights lawyer that we have working for the Israeli government as our prime minister. Similarly, of course, our own Willie McRae was a human rights lawyer, and people have a habit of paying dearly for their commitment to causes, particularly if these causes offend the elites, and in that instance, each of these instances, the UK establishment. But the good news is, and I'm turning to the positive now, Chair, good news is I see the tide turning. There's a very small leak in the dam. It's just a wee drop of water, but the dam isn't intact. We see Ireland, Norway and Spain very calling out the genocide, calling for Palestinian statehood. Slovenia, just a couple of days ago, I don't know if you saw that, has banned Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. The foreign minister says Slovenia acted after EU foreign ministers have failed to agree a joint approach. Well, that's another drop in the dam there, and we're seeing workers using their strength. I'm delighted to see industrial might being used to ensure that ships aren't stuffed with cargoes of death to sail off to continue this massacre that's ongoing. Municipalities are not allowing ships to dock if they know there's munitions on them. Yemen, everyone's whipping boys. In Yemen, there's nothing in the UN Charter, there's nothing in international law that says Yemen doesn't have the same rights to self-defence, absolutely same rights as any other state. There have ever been folks whipping boys. Their maritime blockade has been very affected. 80% of shipping is rerouted, and one of the consequences of that is that the Eilat port in Israel is bankrupt. It's bankrupt. It's owing the local municipality a fortune. Now, the Yanks will no doubt pay for that. The sad thing is, of course, that these acts will be treated in many quarters as not as principal acts in defence of a beleaguered people, rather as attacks on capitalism. And capitalism, as we know, is a mighty force. Another element of dealing with that, of course, is the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. And we see progress there, and not just on we're alert to relabelling. I had a couple of doubts whether I would mention this name or not, because he's not someone I have any regard for whatsoever, but he keeps coming up on my phone for some reason, probably because I keep looking at it. And that's Piers Morgan, who, of course, is a very unpleasant outlook on a lot of things, but he does recognise that if you, I think his words were something like, if you're denying food, you're trying to starve, and that's a war crime. Well, it's a start. It's a start. And he does seem to get in about some of these people, horrible people that he interviews. The American right, my word, I've got some part-time heroes there. Tucker Carlson, if you know that guy, if you see some of his stuff, his view is the US has been controlled by a foreign power. Well, that's a simple fact. It's not simply an opinion. And then someone who I'd never in a million years had dreamt I'd find quoting, if any of you know, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. So a speech the other day there where she continually referred to Israel as nuclear-armed Israel. It gets $3.8 billion annually in aid, got a further $8.7 billion, and much to her annoyance, that is used to provide universal health care and subsidised college for its citizens, something that US citizens don't have. So we know that for other reasons he's losing his support base to an extent. That's a crumbling that you wouldn't have thought you would have seen, and it's probably for very unpleasant from America overall first, but I also understand for the first time there's negative poll ratings on the view of Israel among under 50-year-old Republicans. The New York mayoral election, primary election, and Zoran Mandani. If Donald Trump calls someone a communist, that's normally a badge of honour you can wear. The man clearly has principles. He talks about free transport, rent-free city run. But of course, his sin is that he believes in human rights for all, and he is pro-Palestinian. So we'll watch that with interest. I try and help the Hinge Rajab Foundation. That was named after the very brave wee girl that was shamelessly murdered in a very prolonged and harrowing circumstances. 6 members of her family were killed, and the aid workers who went to her assistance were killed. That organisation actually has identified the person in charge responsible for that and is seeking to prosecute them. Prosecutions hopefully are a bit easier, although there's been a lot of deletion going on, because these people are so confident, they're blasé in showing their acts of monstrosity. and recording them and boasting them to the world. So they're very good. They say our core mission is actively pursue legal action against those responsible for those atrocities, including perpetrators, accomplices, inciters of violence against Palestinians. Through offensive legislation, and I like that word, offensive legislation, we aim to hold these actors accountable in both international and national courts, challenge them with a culture of impunity that has allowed such crimes to persist. UK citizens are fighting in the IDF and returning back here, quite the thing. Early on, I was shocked to understand that one of the beaming, grinning faces with a very large rifle that was actually a pastor at, pastor isn't the word, anyway, was in pastoral care at Leeds University. I don't know that that's the sort of person I would want delivering pastoral care to young people. And it seems to me to be inconceivable that that young woman who was lured as a 15-year-old to go into ISIS and has been treated in such a vile way. It's incredible that there's such a gulf of difference again there. And it is, of course, down to the fact that white lives are clearly far more important than any coloured skin lives, and certainly any Muslim lives. I'm utterly ashamed at the complicity of the UK in all of this. That the foundation's actually joined with another group called the Hague Group. That's a block of nations formed. You would imagine this was unnecessary, but they formed to uphold the ICJ and ICC ruling on Israel and Palestine. I've just got a few words here. Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur. What a wonderful ray of light in this misery that's going on. Just a lovely outlook in life. And when confronted with the abuse and the aggression, maintains her dignity, but maintains it not for her, for everyone else that she's seeking to speak up on behalf of. And my word, we could do with more folk like that. There's lots of good news, I think. There's lots of good news. If you saw the footage the other day of young Israelis burning their draft papers, that really cheered me no end. There was a demonstration, I think, last night, hundreds. Now, it's a start. It's modest, but we have to start somewhere. Hundreds of Palestinians, each carrying the picture of a child murdered in Gaza, protesting against the genocide in Tel Aviv. Now, we know that a very common tactic employed by people who don't have an argument to make is to attack the individual rather than address the issues. And that's what we've seen a lot of the time. Former Prime Minister Olmert talked about the daily atrocities in the West Bank and very clearly said it's done with the full knowledge of the police, the government and the army. These are war crimes and the government is responsible. So these are dangerous times. We should all be careful what we say. As I say, don't get the jail for wearing a T-shirt and having a poster in your picture. There's far more important things you could get the jail for than that. I have difficulty controlling my rage. I have to say I am just seething most of the time. And also my contempt. And I have to temper that because my contempt is for people who have nothing to say. My word, I dislike the folk that come on and try and justify the genocide. But those who stand by and walk on the other side, to quote a book. And I'm not a religious person, but I do believe there's judgment faces us all, and we all have to live with ourselves. And as I say, it's my earnest hope that the perpetrators of this will face judgment in the correct way in the courts. And the good news is that we don't have to invent anything for this. The mechanisms are all there. All it needs is will, and for good folk like yourselves to keep the pressure on. The dam is going, and it's wonderful to see the support from around the world, from people of all religions and none, for what we believe in. I particularly rejoice when I see a rabbi, because Zionism has hijacked Judaism. I'm not a religious person. I was brought up in a religious household. But all of these main religions, there's so much in common. It's a joke to have the separation, but we've never mind separation within denominations. they all have in common the broader picture, the broader humanity, and the fact that Zionists trying to include the wonderful folk I see demonstrating for peace and justice who are Jews, I find very off-putting. So let's stop the genocide and free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Well, that was excellent. Didn't go on too long. That's fine. Fully captured audience. I don't know how the audience would like to do it. Does anybody have some immediate questions for John, or would we like to hear from Salim first and then do it as a round robin at the end? I'm very comfortable either way.
How about now?
How about now? We can hear you perfectly.
So, yeah, I mean, of course, I'm not at all as eloquent as John. So as you can imagine, by trade, I'm a pediatrician. But not only this, I used to be very shy, and even if you've paid me money to get me to speak publicly, I would have never done it prior to Gaza events. So bear with me. And the other thing, I'm usually somebody who doesn't prepare anything, and I just I turn up and I listen, I reflect, and I try to formulate something to say. I have withdrawn a lot from social media just because it's become too much to live with. With the anger, I think, John, I think he's mentioned when you are really angry and you don't know how to channel this anger, and you either channel it into somebody else or you channel it into yourself. So I thought maybe just better to withdraw for a bit. So then the question is, why do I turn up to these events, and why do you guys invite me? So I suppose, just if anyone doesn't know me, I was born in Gaza, 1972. Where generations of my family lived, but up to a point, because my dad actually was not born in Gaza. So my dad was born in Lid or Lod, I don't know whether anyone knew the city, which is a city inside Israel. And this means that my grandfather, who I don't remember him a lot, who also was not born in Gaza. And then my grandmother, at one of the talks, at the hospital talks, I showed her photo. She was from Jaffa. She was born in Jaffa. And of course, it was a big thing for my grandfather to marry my grandmother, because Lod was considered the underdogs and Jaffa was like, the upper, posh city. So for her to marry somebody like him, he had to beg. And her family comes, from quite, not aristocratic, but nearly aristocratic Palestinian family. And again, this means she was not born in Gaza. She was born in Jaffa. So you ask yourself, why somebody then who gets, born into Gaza, ask his family, so why are we here? And, and what made you, and sometimes you get inside you angry. Why did you leave your houses? Why did you migrate from, this is not our house, because we were in a rented house at the time when I remember my childhood. It was very poor. We were quite poor because, imagine immigrants, suddenly finding yourself into a new city. You have no land, you have no inheritance, you've got nothing. You've left your business. My grandfather was a tailor, as well as the family of my grandmother. So this is how, how I was brought up. I was brought up, and then suddenly you grow up a bit. So who's governing us? Are we a state? No, we are Palestinians, but there isn't a Palestinian state. Okay, who's our government? It's Israelis. So at the time, Israelis were physically inside Gaza, so they were in charge of everything. Of borders, of passports, of your ID, of looking after municipality, etc. And even my dad, who's an engineer, He was the first electric engineer in the whole of Gaza. In terms of outside electric engineering, he worked for the Israelis because the municipality of Gaza was under their governance. So he had a lot of dealings with them, which is fine, and life had to go on. And then you ask me, what's your memory of Israelis? I don't think I've rarely met a civilian Israeli. I've mainly met soldiers, and my first glimpses of memory is I will go into a shop and then they will stop by in their jeeps. They will go into the shop. I mean, it was fascinating. You think, oh, who are these? And they've got, of course, their guns or whatever, Kalashnikov, so you call it, and they will buy whatever they want. This was in the 70s when I remember, kind of late 70s into. So my memory is really, you can imagine, it's not really a fun memory. And all you remember about certain people is soldiers and guns, and they are in their tower somewhere. And your dad will tell me about them, that he's met, the Israeli whatever manager or governor, and he told him you need to do this and you need to do that, etc. So this is as far as. So all I knew as growing up is that we Palestinians, our land was stolen from us, and we just forced to leave. 20% of us lost their lives. 80% were forced, 20% stayed behind. So you had Palestinians in diaspora, Palestinians in West Bank, Palestinians in Gaza, Palestinians in Jerusalem, Palestinians in Jordan, but actually 20% of Palestinians stayed behind in Israel, and they are still there. And then I discovered recently from somebody that the reason they stayed there, most of them were in the northern part, because the Zionist command at the time, they had some heart, and they didn't kick them from their houses. I don't know whether there's truth to it or not, but they were kind of, so and then you ask yourself, so why did this happen? Was it something we did, Palestinians, to the Israelis or Jewish people? Did we attack them? Did we? So, and then you get told, no, it's because we were a colony under mandate of the British Empire, and somebody was called Balfour. He just decided, I've promised this land, this holy land, to the Jewish people, because it's really hard for them. They were persecuted in Europe, and Europe has been persecuted them for generations. And because of this, they've agreed they will give them a piece of land, which is Palestine, which is a promised land to the Jewish people. And the British Empire just facilitated that. And of course, Palestinians were, farmers, very simple people, didn't have, any armies, etc. We couldn't really. How do you stand in the face of an empire? It's like, so. And this is how, we were told Jewish migration got facilitated. And then suddenly, from Jewish people being 2%, 3% of the population, they become 5% and 10% and 40 and 50, and and then until now we are equal. It's 50-50, my understanding, John. You can correct me. I think in terms of, it's interesting. It's just also almost God's commandment that even in terms of numbers, we are equal. So this is how I grew up, and that's why I'm here. I suppose is that one thing I say to people, I'm really sorry. No, Palestinians are not outcasts. They are the natives of that land. Because some of you may have, I don't know, a Spanish mother or a German father or etc. All I know of generations of my family, they've always lived on that piece of land. So I don't have any other blood in me apart from being Palestinian. So I'm really sorry. You can't just deny me my right that this is my fucking land. And my grandfather's land and my great-great-grandfather, etc., etc., etc. There's not even a historic argument. This land had received occupiers and invaders for decades and decades and decades. The Romans were there, and the Greeks were there, and even the Persians, by the way, were there, if you remember, in history. But does it mean that suddenly the Persians claim it, or the Romans claim it, or the British claim it either? It was a British mandate. Why are you British not claiming it, that this is a British colony? So it doesn't, in history, it doesn't work like that. just because God asked you to go into this land, again escaping persecution from the Egyptians, you know, the Palestinians harbored you. You can't just claim that this land as yours. Yes, you are welcome to live if you are, you know, if you are native to the land. But if you are fucking Polish or you are fucking Hungarian or whatever, no, you need to stay in your own land. This is where you live. This is where your nations will land. This generation belongs to the native Palestinians who are Muslims and Christians and Jewish and you name it, and Druze, and this land has always harbored and lived together all of these colors. Jewish people always lived side by side with us. Even again, where do I take this? My great grandmother, you know, I remember when, you know, when we were in this very poor house, her bed was in the corridor because we couldn't afford to give her a bedroom, I suppose, my grandfather. And I would sit with her. I was, you know, and she will tell me all these stories about her Jewish friends and families who their neighbors and their Christians, etc. And yes, and she would call them the Khawajis, etc. And she said, and then the great grandmother, what happened? Suddenly, I don't know. Suddenly they've changed and they've kicked us out. So this is the history of this land. So the buildings, you know, the buildings which have been, and the settlements and the dreamland you guys Europeans have given to the Israelis and the Jewish people has been built on the blood of Palestinians like me and my grandfather. And it's shameful. You should be feeling shame. I'm really sorry about your ancestors who did it to us. Because you gave a piece of land. Not just you gave it, you know, you kind of kicked by force the same people who lived in their house. I mean, how does it work? I suppose you guys in the Highland probably will feel my pain because, you know, of the clearances. I don't know, maybe you do, because I still am in my 50s and I don't really understand it. How does it work? So this is normal. And we just Palestinians have to suck it and just forget about it. This is what they've been counting. The Zionists have been counting on the Palestinians to forget this history. We call it the Nakbas, you know. Suddenly, at some stage, maybe not me, for some reason I haven't forgotten. Maybe my children will forget that they are Palestinians, and then the problem will just go away, etc. They've always had, you know. They've always had plans, you know, to kick us into the for some reason they want us to go into the Sinai desert. That's odd. I thought Moses was revealed. God revealed to Moses in the Sinai desert. So it's it must be a lot more sacred than Palestinian land. But for some reason it's fine. I mean, as you know, we believe in Moses, peace upon him, and we believe in Jesus, peace upon him, and etc. So I wouldn't mind, you know, my family, if they are going to be safe to be in the Sinai desert. But the Egyptians are not in agreement, John, though, so we don't know what to do about it. What else to tell you? So this is a bit of history. And then the situation in the ground is dire. It's the worst. I mean, there isn't even any words I can say. I do have a lot of I've got four brothers with my nephews and nieces, and one of my sisters were her family and cousins and you name it and extend who are still in Gaza, and I can't even face them anymore. What do you say? So what do you say? What I said at the talk, you know, this morning. So when you speak to your brother who say he's starving, and he can't find anything to eat, and he can't feed his family. How do you respond to such a thing? What do you say to them? I don't know. I mean, I no longer have any words to say to them. And even if I, you know, even if you send money, is this money has become worthless? I gave an example. If I send, say, one family £100 now, guess what is going to buy them? Even if they find it, because they now even they can't even find sellers who sell them food anymore because such food doesn't exist. So 100 pounds, I think my understanding, might get you 1 kilogram of flour. And then this kilogram of flour, if you are lucky, you might go and find logs of fire to get a fire to bake a bread, and that's it. So, but how many hundreds and thousands of pounds can somebody afford to send them, even if you are a millionaire, which I'm not. But the crux of it, that the Israelis, the evil, wicked Israelis, have blockaded them and starved them to the extent there isn't even food to eat. So where do you, evil in the world, some of you are more red than me. Is there a top evil you can reach? Is there even a worse evil than this? Not even talking about politics or fighting an army or etc., or your right or my right, etc. How can you ever justify in front of yourself or the world, or if you are a believer, if they believe they are believers in God, is it the same God they believe as me and you? How do you stand? I'm really sorry. I mean, I suppose maybe I'm not a person of faith, but I don't know. I'm not it's like the word religious, but I am a person of faith. It's not a secret, and I do believe in the hereafter, and I do believe in the day of judgment. So of course I am sure, if not in this world, there will be judgment in the hereafter. And I'm really sorry. How do you, in your heart, if you are somebody of a person of faith, can you justify starving children, killing them, bombing them, striking them with bombs to pieces? How do you ever justify this? But what is more evil, everyone, is that there are people, and not just people, the media, but if for some reason all the big parties, whether it's Labour or Conservatives, etc. I mean, these are the two main parties. Country isn't apart from Scotland. Is they are almost beautifying this genocide. So how can they are not staying silent? They are making excuses. I mean, I'm using the word beautify just because I'm being sarcastic. Is that it's I don't know how to describe it then. It's, of course there is the legal jargon of, aiding and abetting. But no, I think they are beautifying it. It's suddenly as if massacring Palestinians has become a piece of beauty, a piece of art. Yeah, just go on and just kill them all. This is what they are saying on their TVs, you see. I understand a bit of Russian. So sometimes I switch to the Russian speaking, Israeli channel. And this is and even their speeches at the funerals of their own soldiers. This is what they are talking about. They are saying, oh, he would come every night and say, I've only killed that much, or I've only destroyed these houses. Honestly, it's mania of genocide. It's mania of eliminating the other. So basically, people on Gaza, guys, are being eliminated. This is just to make you aware. So this is no longer. It's maybe at some stage, you think, it's yes, there's some aid going on. Organizations are trying, but as we speak, Gazans are vanishing. If we don't do something about it, Gazans are going to die in their thousands and hundreds of thousands, and they will vanish. So the question always is standing. So what can I do? What can you do? What can we all do? it does seem there's, as John has said, there is a momentum, there is a movement building up, but how can this movement become effective? I think this is really where I'm struggling for, is there's a lot, because I follow a lot of people, you know, I get contacted by a lot of people, but and everyone knows that what they are doing their best, but it's not effective. And I suppose for me is what is effective, the definition effective is to stop the massacre, to stop stop killing them, stop starving them, let them live at least, and then we can talk about dialogue. I mean, I'm really sorry. I mean, what kind of dialogue can you have when your own people are just, and what is your media is not showing you? They are killing us. There's hundreds being killed in Gaza every day. And do you know which proportion is more? Which people are dying more? They call them aid goers. What kind of aid goers? So basically, what this means, David wakes up in the morning. He thinks, "Have we got food? No, we got nothing. So where can I food? Yeah, there is this distribution center. It's controlled by Israelis. It's ex-CIA soldiers who are standing with big guns. So so David, what do you decide? Do you go or do you don't go to get aid, to get a packet of flour or a tin of peas? So I don't know. Raise your hands. Will you go? I will, probably. Yeah. It's fine. So basically, you've got, I don't know what's in terms of probabilities, your chance or my chance of if we go being killed. But yeah, there's high probability that, I don't know how many of us, 10, one of us will be killed if 10 of us go. So people are going to these aid centers. I mean, they call them, I don't know, I mean, is the right term, aid centers? I think they are, no, I don't think so. I think they are the death traps, So you go to try and get some food. There is 1 in 10 of chance you get killed by Israelis or by these, American militia. So this is how bad it is. Is genuinely people are waking up every day in the morning. They've got completely nothing to eat, nothing. And so this is what on the ground, what's happening. Organizations on the ground are not able to, as you know, Israel has blocked all charities from bringing any food into Gaza. This means they have this option either to go to these aid, death camps to get, or sometimes they steal. Of course, if they find anything to steal, but from these, what I call them, warlords. And it's again, it's very dangerous because usually they are armed. And the third, I don't know, is the third option at the moment. I mean, there are these sometimes people who've got more than they need, maybe, or these again warlords. They sell it to you, but you are talking about, as I said. I mean, I've explained to you what buying mean. Money doesn't really buy anything. But remember, it's coming to 2 years. So if you've had some reserves physically, if you've had some fat in you 2 years ago, you don't have it. And the reports coming out of the health authorities in Gaza that people are fading away. They are attending hospitals after exhaustion. Basically, I mean, I look at, I'll talk about myself again in a minute. It's funny thing when you are a British Palestinian and how you get treated in this country. But basically, I mean, I look after children, young people, and sadly, sometimes I see children, young people with eating disorders who starve themselves intentionally. So it's a horrible disease, mentally, psychologically, etc. But basically, it's done to Palestinians on a scale. So basically, they are creating eating exhaustion, eating starvation in these people intentionally. So they are becoming skeletons, and they're just fading away. And eventually, if you starve yourself enough, you just die. So this is what they are doing. So there are, and again, I can't. Sometimes I force myself and I watch the news, the photos of babies and children who are starved, and of course. I mean, they would argue, yeah, but children in Africa are starving. Why are you not demonstrating? But the children in Africa, they are not dying and starving because somebody is not giving them food. It's they've got famine or etc. A natural disaster. Their farm hasn't produced. But with Palestinians, it's you evil people who are intentionally starving them. You are not getting food to them. You are using food as a method of war by starving. International law. I don't know. Has everyone lost faith? I don't know what international law mean anyway. I think there is an international law for if you are European, white, a Christian, Trump supporter, Starmer supporter, does apply to you. But if you are a Palestinian like me, does it? Oh, by the way, does it international law or British law or Scottish law apply to me, John? Do you think? I'm British. I can show you my passport. It's not red anymore, by the way. It's this dark blue color. Has it really given me any privilege? Or not really? No. I've written to David Cameron. I've written to David Lammy. By the way, David Cameron was more sympathetic than Lammy. Imagine, honestly, because David Cameron had the guts to get his department to reply to me, and there was the hints of a sympathy there. Well, David Lammy, they did. He said, "Oh, this is not my problem." And he passed it to the Home Office to reply. He didn't even have the guts, the fucker, to reply to me, because I don't count. It's so. This is you can imagine how it's. So there is a hierarchy of fairness. It's we are all equal, but some of us are more equal than others. Blah blah blah. Which is I'm just experiencing it as real life kind of phenomena where actually is. I don't know. You can tell me if I wasn't me and I was, I don't know, pick up on somebody, Peter. So if Peter was in my situation and he's written and he's campaigned and he and I spend all my weekends giving talking to news bulletins and TV etc. to campaign for the. Do you think he would have been invited to meet the Prime Minister? Would you, Peter? If you asked for it?
I don't know. I'm not as eloquent as usually.
You see, this is
a chance just because of my skin color, for sure.
Yeah, I can tell you this is not a spontaneous eloquence. It's honestly it's out of necessity. So yeah, it's really horrible experience to be a British Palestinian as well, because you just feel so dehumanized, devalued. And I don't really understand it, because I am trusted to look after the offspring and children of the British Empire, but my family doesn't. So I go everywhere, every day. I go to work. I save lives. And, I do my best. But when it comes to me, about my human life or my rights or the rights of my family, the UNCRC, the United Nations Charter on children's rights. Imagine I get emails about it every day, and then I have to read it, and you think, really? Which children are you talking about? Oh yeah, okay, these children, but not these children. And John touched on international inequality when it comes to health. It's mind blowing. So I'll take one condition I look after. I look after children with cystic fibrosis in this country and in the Highland, and they are surviving until they are 50 and 60 and 70. And go to the Middle East or even Gaza. I went to Gaza a few years back. They die in their teens still. But for some reason, people in the Middle East are very forgiving. You see, they've accepted that they just wanted to live in peace. And I don't like politics. I never did. I never subscribed to any political party. But I'll touch on it. the internal Palestinian political life is complex, is not straightforward, but we are not like any other nation. It's amazing. We get the blame by the international playing. Say, you see, if you Palestinians just have agreed together, and you form the unity government, maybe the Israelis would give you peace. Have you ever heard any more hypocrisy than this? Why should we? I mean, why can't we be different? And so why Israelis are allowed to have 100 parties and have right wing and left wing and but anyway, it's what Hamas did was stupid. So Palestinians have the right to resistance, have the right to their own country, to be sovereign, to self-govern, etc. But if you are governing a nation, if you are governing a group of people, if you are in charge, you have a duty of care, whether you are Hamas or you are whatever or you are etc. And unfortunately, what is happening to the Palestinians, Hamas is to blame, because they knew that we are the weakest of the weakest of the weakest link, and we knew that the Arab world is weak, the Islamic world is even weaker, etc. They should not have done this. But again, this is just a small piece. And there are a lot of Palestinians who like me who are very, who are blaming Hamas of what is happening in Gaza. But of course, in the same time, I'm not saying it's we Palestinians don't have the right to resist or right to govern or etc. There is hundreds and hundreds of UN nations resolutions where our rights have been described and etc. And Israel has violated every single one of them. Yeah. But the hypocrisy, you see the hypocrisy in the West is that Hamas is proscribed, but Israel is our ally. Yeah. And then every sentence the BBC, when they talk about Palestinians, it's according to the Gaza Hamas blah 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 terrorist organization. But just remind me, is not Netanyahu a wanted war criminal? So why is not every sentence in news bulletin not followed by the way, this is a country whose prime minister is wanted by the International Criminal Court? Nobody's talking about that he's wanted. So again, the international law only applies to certain races, certain humanities, certain people. So this is a bit about politics, about this. As I said, in terms of Gaza, I don't know what else. It's honestly the worst ever. And then I thought, usually, what do we do? I don't know. I mean, it's really tough. You can imagine every one of you are here because every one of you cares, but also I think every one of you have been trying. I mean, because but we are not being effective. So this is maybe is where what we discuss. How can we, as a movement, become more effective? And effective means it has to bring change, because the status quo is. What does I suppose what does status quo mean for us here in Britain is that if today they're after the Palestinians and so, but they are already after certain vulnerable groups of our society. I mean, this Labour government, if you think about it, is the most hawkish government we've ever had so far. They've been after the elderly. I mean, imagine you come in government and the first law you pass is to stop fuel allowances to the elderly people. I mean, how can you? I mean, is there any more stupidity than this? I'm really sorry. But I'm not a politician. John maybe can tell me is this stupid or not stupid? Even if you are right wing, And then okay, and then they were like, yeah, it's okay, we'll try to help. And then after the next group thereafter, we thought maybe we'll be after Amazon or after after big. No, they're not. They're after the elderly. Sorry, the disabled people. Yes, we are not perfect when it comes to to disability laws and benefits, etc., etc. But I'm really, is this the right way to do it? But this just, if it tells you something, it tells you that they are rotten. Their souls are rotten, and all they care about is their military complex and how much money is at the end of the day in their pockets and the pockets of their masters. No, I'm really sorry. They don't care about the families I look after. Because the families I look after, sometimes they can't come to see me in an appointment because they can't afford their bus fare. So if we are really a caring society, no, this is not just about Palestinians. They are after, they want us to turn into the USA. They want us to turn into very rich people versus very poor people. Masters versus slaves. This is what they want us to become, the UK. And we should just stand. In my opinion, John and others, this is not just about Palestine. Palestine is the litmus because it has shown the rottenness of the European, UK, US policymakers. Anyway, I don't know whether I've said enough, but thank you for listening.
I think you've said an enormous amount, Salim. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. It's not an easy listen, obviously, but it's an incredibly powerful listen, I would say. And I think you make so many points that are just true. the hypocrisy and the ignorance, and that's why I was writing so many notes from both of you. I think those are two very, very powerful narratives there. I would just like to say a huge thank you to John and Salim for coming. It's always interesting to hear you guys have both got to say. So thank you very, very much. Right, I think we can end it there. Thank you. I'm sure Marie are we going to put the recording up on YouTube? Is that the plan? Okay, so that will be accessible as part of our library of events as well. So that'll be on the Lochaber Supports Palestine YouTube page, which we will share on the socials. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.